Welcome inside the War Room. I'm your host, Andrew Valancourt, and we're back today for episode 55 of the Dynasty War Room podcast. On today's show, we are going to break down some rookie quarterbacks and get into those rankings. Last week, we did our first big edition of our top 24 overall rookie rankings for the upcoming 2025 NFL Draft. Today, we're going to focus just on the quarterbacks, go a little bit deeper on some of these guys, and talk through a class that is a little bit underwhelming. So before we get into those quarterbacks, though, as a reminder, go follow this podcast on whatever platform you are currently listening to this on. We're on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, Amazon, you name it, we're there. So go leave us a follow so you don't miss any future episodes. And if you have the time and willingness to leave us a 5-star review, that is much appreciated. And to go find us on social media. So we're on Twitter or X at Dynasty War Room. We have a Facebook page and YouTube as well. Go subscribe there at Dynasty War Room. And with all that being said, let's just jump on into these quarterbacks and get down to it. So this is a very, very different quarterback class compared to last year. This is not going to be a rookie class where you have 4, 5, 6 quarterbacks that are going in the first and second rounds of your rookie drafts. It's much, much less enticing this year. There's just not a lot of exciting players, and there's really only a couple of guys that I'm that interested in drafting in general onto my dynasty teams. And you've probably heard that, general sentiment across the board if you've, paid attention to any other shows or analysts across the space so far this year. So at number 1 is going to be Cam Ward. So he is the consensus number 1 QB right now. He's the projected number 1 overall pick to the Tennessee Titans. There's been some trade talk about whether the Giants might try to jump up from 3 or could Cleveland have some interest. We'll see what happens there, but it seems at this point that the Titans are locked into Cam Ward and are going to be making that selection. And coming out of Miami, he's an experienced guy. He spent some time at Incarnate Word before transferring to Washington State, and then finally his final season at Miami, Florida. So 5 years of college experience, which we've seen in recent years has actually been pretty good for players that have hit 35 plus starts in their college career. So Cam Ward definitely has that experience. He's a lot of time on the field in college, and he got better every single year. So that's something that you really like to see from your quarterback prospects. And he can kind of do a bit of everything. I don't know that he necessarily, I'm trying to think of the right word here, but he doesn't excel or he's not awesome at any one particular thing, but he seems to me like a player who is above average at a lot of things. And so 22.8 years old as of right now here at the end of March, and he's 6'1", 219 pounds. In his final year at Miami, he had a 67.2 completion percentage, over 4,300 passing yards, 39 touchdowns to 7 interceptions. And in college, rushing yards are typically calculated with sack yardage included. So if you were to Google, Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders, the rushing yards, the numbers that you see are probably not accurate in terms of what you're actually looking for. Pro Football Focus actually does in their premium stats. They do keep track of rushing yards for quarterbacks regardless of sacks. So that is very helpful when it comes to breaking down these players because the NFL does not include sack yardage into those numbers. So Cam Ward had 44 rushes for 336 yards and 4 additional touchdowns last year at Miami when you don't factor in the loss of yards that he would have had from sacks. That's going to be especially important for Shedeur Sanders' numbers, who we're going to get to in a few minutes. But 336 yards on the ground is not too bad, especially on just 44 attempts. This is not a statue. This is a player that can, escape the pocket, make plays happen with his legs. Now, is he a run-first quarterback or someone that is looking to, scramble with the ball? No, this is not. This is not a player that is a run-first guy. He's not someone that's, focused on trying to run around on the field. He is definitely a guy that will extend plays and get out of the pocket to avoid pressure and keep those plays alive, but he is looking to throw the ball downfield before he'll take off and run, which is probably a good thing for the NFL. I think that he's going to be able to have some more big plays, and he has the ability to rush if needed, and that's a big bonus for fantasy because we've talked about this, that rushing yards for quarterbacks are what give you a floor in fantasy football. If this is a guy that can get you 15 to 30 rushing yards per game, that's a couple extra points that you get tacked on to whatever yardage he can pick up through the air. And that's going to help those fantasy numbers, especially if he can run near the goal line. We've seen over the past several years the quarterbacks that can run efficiently at the goal line, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts. Those guys are monsters for fantasy football. Now, I don't think that Cam Ward is necessarily that guy. However, I've talked recently about some other quarterbacks that I think he can be like in terms of rushing ability. We mentioned Justin Herbert, Patrick Mahomes, even a Brock Purdy, something where, no, he's not going to run for 50, 60, 70 yards per game. But he can scramble when need be. He can get you, 25 yards and just a nice little boost to what should be some solid fantasy numbers from Cam Ward. This is someone that has great arm strength. He can make all the throws across the field. We've mentioned his mobility and his ability to extend plays. He also is someone that does a pretty good job of anticipating when receivers are going to get open. I think this is kind of a big difference between Ward and Sanders, is that Ward will sometimes throw the ball before the receiver is actually open, whereas Sanders typically will wait for that receiver to get open, which sometimes it results in fewer turnovers, but can also, result in less big plays, whereas Cam Ward is able to, anticipate that those receivers are going to run the route and get open and can result in some really nice plays. On the downside for Cam Ward, I wouldn't say that he is an upper tier quarterback in terms of accuracy. Now, I think this can be a little bit slanted because on the plays where the receiver doesn't run the route the way that Ward anticipates, or he does have, misreads the play, it can result in what looks like a bad throw. I don't know that he necessarily is someone that just straight up is going to have errant throws. I think it's just something where he's going to have to get on the same page with his wide receivers, the coaching staff, be familiar and comfortable with the playbook, and that those things can be corrected. And so all in all, I like what I see from Cam Ward. I think that we talked about last week in our overall rankings that this is someone that should probably be going in the top 5 of a Superflex Dynasty rookie draft. In a one quarterback league, it's a little bit tougher. I think we're talking somebody more at the back of the first, somewhere, that 1-2 turn type of range. But in Dynasty Superflex, which is what the majority, in fact, it's what all of my leagues are, Superflex format, he's a top 5 pick. And I think that you could see him as high as 2 or 3 if the landing spots for guys like Marion Hampton and Ted McMillan or Travion Henderson are not great. Right now, I have him as my number 4 overall player behind Hampton and McMillan. But certainly, if you were a quarterback-needy team picking somewhere between 2 and 5, you should feel pretty good about adding Cam Ward to your team. I think he's the clear-cut number 1 quarterback in this class. I think that there's a pretty big gap between him and everyone else. And so Cam Ward, the clear number 1 quarterback in my rankings. At number 2, it is Shedeur Sanders out of Colorado, projected first-round pick. We don't know whether that's going to mean top 5, top 10, or whether he's going to slide into the teens or the 20s. It's kind of been all over the place. There certainly is some speculation he could go number 2 overall to the Browns, could go 3 to the Giants. Both of those teams do need a quarterback, and it would make some sense. Would feel like a bit of a reach. I don't think he necessarily is the type of quarterback that would fit the bill as someone that we have seen go in the top 5 in the past, but this is just another thing where quarterbacks are so important to these NFL teams, and you often only have the chance to take a shot on these, guys with high potential unless you're picking in the top 5. So boom bust, high risk, high reward type of situation here for Shedeur Sanders and these teams picking in the top 10. At Colorado last year, he completed 74% of his passes, 4,134 yards through the air, 37 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, and he did run the ball 64 times for 305 yards and 4 touchdowns. So, as I mentioned, those rushing yards are vastly different than what they would look like if you Googled it, because Shedeur Sanders got sacked a ton. And so his rushing yards looked significantly worse because that yardage was factored in. So Sanders can run the ball a little bit. Very similar to Cam Ward in that he does have some mobility. I would say that Ward has the slight edge in terms of who I think is a better runner, but Sanders certainly has the ability to escape the pocket. He's accurate, extremely accurate across all parts of the field, and he's very good at throwing on the run. He has nice touch on his throws. He has solid size, 6'1", 212 pounds, so pretty similar there to Cam Ward. And he's someone that I think can get it done in the NFL if he lands in a good system, particularly with a team that doesn't have a terrible offensive line like Colorado had in college. So in terms of the downside for Shedeur Sanders, we mentioned the sacks. He does not do a very good job at avoiding sacks. And whether that's an issue of him holding onto the ball or just having a bit of a lower awareness in the pocket, it's hard to say. But he certainly struggled with that in college, and he's going to need to make those reads quicker, get the ball out in the NFL. And I think some of that comes with the fact that he is a little bit slower with his progressions. So, those two things kind of go hand in hand. So if he can improve on that, get a little quicker at making those reads, he could be a very solid NFL quarterback because he does have good accuracy. He can get the ball, especially in the short and intermediate range. He doesn't have the same level of arm strength as a Cam Ward. I would say he can make some of those deep ball throws, and he has the touch for it, but he's much less consistent at making those deep throws. Obviously benefited a lot from having Travis Hunter at wide receiver at Colorado. So there are some definite things to like, but certainly some red flags as well. Also has a lot of college experience. He started over at the FCS level, Jackson State, and then transferred over to Colorado. So pros in terms of his time on the field. He's been a starter in college. So he is going to be a little bit on the older side. He's 23.1 right now here at the end of March. And it's going to be really interesting to see where he goes, because I think that's going to dictate a lot of his rookie draft capital in terms of your own dynasty drafts. Because if this is someone that goes 2 or 3 overall to the Giants or to the Browns, I think that he slots into the mid to late first round in rookie drafts. But if he falls and he starts going down towards the Jets or the Raiders or even further, and we're talking other teams like the Steelers, the Seahawks are potentially a dark horse team to take a quarterback. I know they just signed Sam Darnold, but when that contract came out, it's really more of a 1-year deal for Sam Darnold. So there's a lot of other teams that could have some interest, but whether or not he is a good enough player to go in the top 3, I'm not sure. I don't know that I would do it, but I'm not an NFL GM, so we'll see what teams do. But I'm a little bit skeptical about Sanders, and this quarterback class as a whole from this point on definitely is not great. So let's move into that. My number 3 player, and that's Jackson Dart, quarterback out of Ole Miss. He's being projected to be a borderline first, second round pick. So right there on the edge. He could go as high as the teens or early 20s. I know Pittsburgh has been talked about as a potential landing spot. Or he could be someone that goes in the early second round if someone like Cleveland or New York decides not to take Shedeur Sanders in the top 5. It could be a nice spot for that. Or, of course, there's the the idea of trading up into the back few picks of the first round to get that fifth-year option. I know that's a pretty popular way to go about getting a quarterback that is, in this type of range. He is 21.8 years old, 6'2", 223 pounds. So he definitely has the size, and he's at a good age range there. 69.3% completion rate, and 4,279 yards through the air, 29 touchdowns to 6 interceptions. And he's a much better runner than both Ward and Sanders. He had 100 rushes, 648 yards, and 3 touchdowns on the ground. And while those numbers are better than both Ward and Sanders, again, you got to take note of the number of attempts, about double what Cam Ward had. So while Dart has the much better production on the ground in terms of his average per attempt, it's not that different from Cam Ward. A little bit better than Shedeur Sanders, but Cam Ward is a bit more comparable. And Jackson Dart benefited a lot from a lot of designed runs in college. I don't know that that's going to translate to the NFL. In fact, I'm very skeptical of that. You don't see a lot of designed runs at the NFL level unless your quarterback is somebody like Lamar Jackson. So we'll see how that goes. He definitely had those big numbers in college, really nice production, was able to limit the turnovers. He has lots of experience. He's a mobile guy, and he has some good touch on his throws as well. However, he does lack arm strength. I wouldn't say he's got a big arm for getting those deep throws down the field. And he is more of a first read quarterback. So this is kind of the knock on some of these offenses like Ole Miss and Texas and some of these more spread true college offenses where you're making one read or it's a read option and stuff like that. It doesn't always translate well to the NFL. Sometimes it does, and it works out well, but other times these types of players can really struggle if they don't get around on the mental side of the game, where they're making those progressions instead of just looking at your number one guy. So that's certainly a concern, but it's one of those things where if he goes in the first round of the NFL draft, he is likely going to be a player that you can get in the early portion of the second round of your rookie drafts. And I think that is a much more palatable place to take someone like Jackson Dart rather than taking him in the first round, even if he does go, to Pittsburgh at 21 or one of those other teams in the later half of the round. There's enough question marks there for me where I'm not going to be super excited about making that jump. To me, it's kind of a Cam Ward or bust unless you have a contending team that's picking at the back of the first round and you are in desperate need of quarterback, then you can go the Shedeur Sanders route. But Jackson Dart, to me, he's an interesting prospect that I certainly think has some potential. He has the size, he has the experience, he has the mobility and the college production, but I'm worried about the system. I'm worried that rushing ability could drop off a bit at the NFL level, and so for those reasons, I'm a bit concerned about Jackson Dart and his potential in the NFL. At number 4, we're going to go with Jalen Milroe from Alabama, projected second-round pick right now. He's 22.3 years old, 6'2", 217 pounds, and Jalen Milroe is probably one of the most polarizing players at the position or in this class. And it's because I think there's a big distinction between his ability as a fantasy football player and his potential to be an actual real-life starting quarterback in the NFL. At Alabama, in his final season there, 63.3% completion rate, 2,834 yards, 16 touchdowns, and 11 interceptions. So not great. Really not a very exciting passing line from Jalen Milroe, but it's the rushing ability that's exciting. 150 attempts, 879 yards, 20 touchdowns. He did have 11 fumbles, so definitely is a fumbling issue there. Turnover problems in general between the 11 fumbles and 11 interceptions. So that's something to be concerned about. But, 879 yards and 20 touchdowns speaks for itself. In fantasy football, that is great. That is the awesome, rushing production that you would love to see from a quarterback. Gives you a huge baseline. And you'd be happy with those numbers from a running back in college, let alone a quarterback. So that's where the excitement is with Jalen Milroe. Now, I think we've seen similar players in terms of, guys like Anthony Richardson and Malik Willis. And I struggle with that archetype. I very late in the process kind of got pushed into buying into Anthony Richardson because of the incredible athletic ability. Now, he's a much bigger player, slightly better college passer than Anthony Richardson, but still just something where I'm going to have a hard time drafting Jalen Milroe because I don't think he's an NFL quarterback. I don't think he's going to be able to throw the ball. I don't think he's going to be able to go through progressions and read defenses. He struggled mightily against upper-tier defenses in college. If you watched his 2 games against Michigan, last year in the Rose Bowl and then this year in the bowl game, just absolutely had a difficult time with Michigan's defense and their ability to pressure him. He has really low pocket awareness for somebody that's a good runner, which is concerning. Bad decision-making. He really lacks touch. He kind of only throws a fastball, which is fine in the short term and the midterm, but not great for those instances where you do need to make a touch pass or find those receivers in crowded situations. It's just not a great combination of skills here for Jalen Milroe. He lacks accuracy. We mentioned the turnover problems, but on the flip side, he's an elite athlete. He's fast. He's got good size. He has a very strong arm, so he can make the throws down the field. But it's just one of those things where he's firing the ball in there, not necessarily going to be able to place the ball where he wants. He can get it there. It's just a matter of, is the receiver going to be able to catch the ball? And then, of course, the rushing ability that we've talked about, he definitely possesses that. So Jalen Milroe is going to be an interesting player in terms of where he gets drafted. If he goes in the second round, then I think he's going to be worth taking in the second round of a rookie draft because of the insane rushing upside. Because if he were to hit, even though the chances are low, he's going to be a great player to have on your fantasy team. Now, do I think the chances of him becoming an above-average NFL starter are high? No. No, I do not. I don't think that is very likely at all. I really don't see any of these quarterbacks outside of Cam Ward becoming a true upper echelon quarterback in this league. I think Sanders has a chance to be, kind of an average quarterback. I think maybe like a Geno Smith. But outside of Ward and then Sanders to an extent, I just don't know that I see any above average starters in this draft class. And so Jalen Milroe, because I think he's going to struggle to make reads, to have a good passing game in the NFL, he's going to be more of a run-only guy, and really is going to be looking more like what Anthony Richardson looks like, but without the same level of size that Richardson has. Milroe, I think I mentioned his age, 22.3 years old, and just somebody that I probably won't have a lot of on my teams. At number 5, I have Quinn Ewers out of Texas. Projected third-round pick, 22 years old, was a very highly regarded recruit. Stands at 6'2", 214 pounds, completed 65.8% of his passes at Texas this last year, 3,469 yards, 31 touchdowns to 12 interceptions. He also ran the ball 37 times for 90 yards and 2 touchdowns, but he also fumbled the ball 10 times. So just like Jalen Milroe, Quinn Ewers struggles with turnovers. And for someone that gives you almost nothing on the ground, I have a very difficult time seeing Quinn Ewers becoming anything more than an NFL backup. And he's got college experience. He does have some nice touch on his throws, certainly has the recruiting pedigree, but he lacks arm strength. He just repeatedly turns over the ball. He has a lot of plays that could have resulted in even more interceptions, but did not. He's an inconsistent passer. He struggles with accuracy. He's also had some injury concerns throughout his college career. So not a lot to be excited about, to be honest, with Quinn Ewers. And I think he's going to be drafted largely on his, the hype that he received as a prospect coming out of high school. And he was a winner. I mean, he obviously had some nice success at Texas, was not, a bad college player. I just don't know how it translates to the NFL. I think he's someone that's much better suited to be a backup for a season or two, and then maybe he'll get an opportunity to step in somewhere, whether it be through his own improvement or an injury situation or whatever it may be. But I have a hard time seeing a team drafting him to be a starter right out of the gate. I just don't think it's going to happen. And he's really only number 5 even here, based on the pedigree that he has and his success at Texas. But the guy that's right after him, Tyler Shuck, who it looks like Show, but it's pronounced Shuck. Tyler Shuck out of Louisville, transferred to Louisville from Texas Tech, started his career at Oregon, just a big time, has spent a long time in college. He is someone that is also projected 3rd round right now, and while I don't know that he has quite the same ceiling as a Quinn Ewers, who, if he were to figure everything out, could turn into a good player, Tyler Shuck is someone that I think has an opportunity to hit the field sooner than Quinn Ewers. So they're 5 and 6 in my rankings, but this is something where if Tyler Shuck goes earlier in the draft, he will almost certainly be moved up in these rankings, and he could even challenge Jalen Milroe. It's one of those things where Tyler Shuck could end up being a better pro than some of these other guys, but doesn't have as high of a fantasy upside. And then the big knock for him is going to be age. So 25.4 years old. He's going to be almost 26 by the time the NFL season starts. So obviously puts him way behind the 8 ball. And he's 6'5", 219 pounds, so great size. And this past season at Louisville, 62.1 completion percentage, 3,191 yards through the air, 23 touchdowns to 6 interceptions. He also ran the ball 30 times for 132 yards and a touchdown. So, big guy. He's got the arm strength. He's got the experience. He does have some mobility. He's not necessarily a running quarterback, but he can move around a little bit. Not quite, a statue, but not someone that's necessarily going to run the ball around a lot, especially given his injury history. He had some broken collarbone issues, broke his leg. I mean, this is a guy that has been in college forever, and between the age and the injury history and some of the inconsistency with his accuracy, he could get a shot early because at this point, he's pretty much as experienced and ready to go as he's going to be. But I don't know that I see the interest for me in terms of a guy who's, 25 and a half years old and has really struggled to stay healthy. He was talked about as an earlier draft pick, previously in his career over the past couple of years, but he just continued to struggle to stay on the field, transferred around. And so there does seem to be some excitement for him. He could be moving up boards, and if he ends up going in the 2nd round or anything higher, which would be pretty shocking to me. But it's certainly a possibility. And you could see a team saying, look, this guy, he is as pro-ready as he's going to be given his age. And if a team needs a bridge guy or they just want to take a shot on a rookie without spending a 1st-round pick, this could be the guy. So definitely some potential. And we'll see what teams really think of him. But he's in the same range here with Quinn Ewers at 5 and 6 in my rankings. Now, the next 4 guys I'm going to kind of talk about as a group. I'm not going to go into detail on these guys because I think once we get past that group of 6, there's really not going to be any other quarterbacks in this draft that are worth talking about in terms of players that you're going to be selecting in your draft. I think we're talking about, maybe 4th or 5th round rookie picks or guys you get off of waivers, depending on the team they go to, if they're backups. But at least 4 names that I think are interesting to pay attention to about where they go in the draft. They're all a bit on the older side, but we'll start with Will Howard out of Ohio State, projected 4th-round pick. He's 23 and a half years old, 6'4", 236 pounds, just won the national title, of course, with Ohio State, transferred over from Kansas State. And he's been a productive player in college. He can run the ball a little bit. We'll see what teams think of him, but I think there's certainly some backup capability. Kyle McCord, who he replaced, started at Syracuse this past year and had a really productive season. So 22 and a half years old for him, projected 5th-round pick, 6'3", 218 pounds. So good size. Has had some experience in a couple different systems and done well. Struggled against Michigan. That was kind of his big knock. But, Will Howard struggled against Michigan too. So just interesting players to keep an eye on. Obviously, Ohio State felt better about Will Howard, and I think that's kind of the consensus right now. But I could certainly see McCord hanging around as an NFL backup. Dylan Gabriel out of Oregon, a bit on the smaller side at 5'11", 205 pounds. Projected 5th-round pick, 24.2 years old. Certainly had some productive numbers over at Oregon this year in a very good offense. But given the size and the style of offense, I think there's definitely going to be some concerns, but does have plenty of experience and could certainly find a role as a backup somewhere. And then the final guy, Curtis Rourke from Indiana, who likely a later day 3 pick, probably 6th round. He's 24.3 years old. So again, somebody that probably doesn't have a very high ceiling or starter upside, but potential high quality backup. 6'4", 220 pounds. Led Indiana to the college football playoff for the first time and was awesome. So, of course, Indiana, if you don't know, is my alma mater, so I watched a lot of Indiana games, and he played the entire season with a torn ACL and still put up incredible numbers. He missed a couple games in the middle of the year due to thumb injury, but tough guy and could certainly find his way onto a team as a backup. But in terms of fantasy football and your dynasty value, I don't think any of these guys are players that you should be burning rookie picks on. I think they're free agent waiver ads if you have the space, and particularly only in superflex leagues where having those backup quarterbacks can sometimes give you some nice value. But in terms of who you're actually drafting, to me, this is pretty limited to the top of this draft class. Cam Ward, going to be a 1st-round pick in your rookie drafts, top 5 player. Shedeur Sanders, probably a later 1st-round pick, depending on where he goes. And then Jackson Dart will certainly be somebody that gets taken. I think he's more of a 2nd-round rookie pick. And then you kind of have your 3 wild cards with Jalen Milroe, Quinn Ewers, Tyler Shuck. We'll see what happens there. But I'm not super eager about any of these guys. Cam Ward is really the only player that I would leave my draft feeling great about in terms of his potential. Everyone else definitely has some big question marks. And that's just the way that this class looks at this moment. So we're going to continue talking about these rookies and getting into the rest of the rookie class each week leading up to the draft from this point on. We're going to have running backs, wide receivers, tight ends, and then we'll probably do an episode where we focus on some rookie sleepers and players that we like that don't necessarily make the top 10, top 12 players at their position, depending on how many guys we can get to, especially at running back. It's a very big running back class, and I will not have enough time to get through 30 guys in an episode. So we might do something where I focus on, maybe my top 12 or 15, and then talk about some of those other guys in another episode here before the draft. So stay tuned for all of those rookie ranking shows coming up over the next month. And, as we gear up for the NFL draft, which is now a month away. So there you have it. We appreciate you all for tuning in, and we'll be back next week with some more rookie content. This is the Dynasty War Room podcast. My name is Andrew Valancourt. Thank you all so much for tuning in, and we'll talk to you all next week.